I was sitting around thinking yesterday, I really need to do a video that explains to men why some women are attracted to bad boys, thugs, and players. And while I was sitting there, I thought about it. I said, didn't I already do that show? That sounds so familiar. So I went back through my Blog Talk archives, and sure enough, I found the show. It's from some years ago. It features an author, and it also features A.J. Johnson, who you may remember. She played the mom in Baby Boy. Opposite, she played Tyrese's mother in Baby Boy, but she's doing life coaching now. And so she was actually a guest on my show. I used to have some pretty, decent name folks in there on there. But in this one, she's got like the Sister Streets version, and the author has the more academic viewpoint. So between the two, we had a very, very interesting hour chopping it up on why women make the choices that they do in partners. I think you'll find it extremely interesting and kind of entertaining as well. Enjoy.
One of the chief things that single men are confused about is the conflict between what women say they want in a man versus what they find themselves attracted to. Because like a moth to a flame, women are attracted to thugs, bad boys, and players. My guests tonight are going to help us figure out exactly why. I have some theories. And, there's some things, of course, that we all notice, one of which is, think back to that show, that 1990s family sitcom called Family Matters with Jaleel White. Remember when he was Steve Urkel? How Laura was just so irritated with him. She didn't want to have anything to do with him. She rolled her eyes. She totally disrespected him. But when he came out as smooth, suave, debonair Stefan, well, she was all over that. And it's the same thing with women. Now, one guy told me, he wrote and he says, I can't really blame women because, women make mistakes just like men do. Women are human and they get confused about exactly what they want in a man. They make poor choices sometimes just like men do. Relationships and sex are no exception to this rule. But he says, I read somewhere that the nice guy is looked at like a salad and the thug is looked at like the cake. Well, which one would you rather eat? Although the salad is healthier, the cake tastes better, even if it makes you fat. And although the nice guy may be a good father and husband and hit or miss in the sack, the thug gives short-term satisfaction and may be a crappy father and husband. So there it is. There's a double standard. We know what's healthy, but we know what we like to eat and what tastes good, even if it gives us a stroke later on in life. So that was his analogy of the good guys versus the players and the bad boys. So joining me tonight, we have Dr. Carole Lieberman. She is the author of an interesting little book called Men to Run From, so you can find the right one to run to. And in it, she outlines 20 different types of guys that are all what I call loosely fall under the umbrella of knuckleheads, and are some of the bad boys that we'll be discussing tonight. And also on the phone with me is actress A.J. Johnson. You probably remember her in her role as the sexy mom in Baby Boy with Tyrese and Ving Rhames. So she's on the phone too. So we have two great ladies on to talk about tonight's topic, which is bad boys, why women love them, how to live with them, and when to leave them alone. If you want to call in with your questions or comments, the phone number is 347-327-9215. That's 347-327-9215. Be sure to press 1 on your keypad so I know you want your call to be picked up. And we are rolling with the show. So ladies, thank you for calling. This should be a fun show.
I've been waiting for this. This is AJ. Thank you so much for having me. I have been waiting for this night to come. You don't understand. I am so excited. I don't know if it's going to be more helpful for me or for anybody else that we're talking to, but I'm excited to help and to be helped.
And me too.
Well,
I'm happy to be here as well.
But between the two of you and me laughing, we should have a good time.
Exactly.
So let's start by defining the bad boy. What is a bad boy and what is not a bad boy? Because I think sometimes that label is applied to guys that are way so over the top that I don't even know if they qualify as being bad. They are just like vicious, ridiculous, crazy. You know what I mean? They're just like way extreme. So I would kind of like you guys to define what should women consider to be, quote, a bad boy?
Well, in my book, Bad Boys, Why We Love Them, How to Live With Them, and When to Leave Them, I define 12 different types of bad boys. And besides the type that everybody thinks of with the black leather jacket and the motorcycle, I have a whole spectrum of bad boys, from what I call the fixer-upper lover or the frazzled frog, who is a guy who doesn't have his life together. He is looking for, well, bad boys are made by the relationship that they have with their mothers, who are overly critical or overly enmeshed or not there or alcoholic or,
Or how
12
about
different types of mothers, essentially.
Carole, let's also add,
types.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let's also add, there's also bad boys that are defined by the relationships that they do not have with their mothers.
Well, I mean, even if if the mother isn't there, either physically or emotionally, that's, in a sense, a relationship. I mean, that's a lack of a relationship. Okay, but what I'm saying is that whatever kind of situation there is with their mother, that is what determines what kind of bad boy they become, whether it's this frazzled frog who doesn't get very much nurturance from their mother, to the Prince of Darkness, who is the abusive type, or the lethal lover, who's the man who's in jail that has all the women writing love letters to them. So whatever kind they are, that is determined by their mother, and then the women who are attracted to them, I talk about how their relationship with their father, and again, it could be all 12 different types. The father is not there, the father is sexually abusive, physically abusive, overly enmeshed with her, and so on. But that determines which kind of bad boy she's going to be attracted to. So the common denominator, I mean, I know we'll get into the different types later, but the common denominator of all the bad boys is that they're heartbreakers. They just break the woman's heart in different ways.
I want to add, the one thing I want to add to that in the definition, and one of the reasons I want to add, I also want to say before I say this, one of the reasons that a lot of the listeners may not know that I have not been on screen in a few years is because I've been very, very successful and globally, thank you God, doing some life coaching and lifestyling for not just celebrities here in Hollywood and my community, but for executives, for magazines. It's not a business I asked for. It's just that I had a lot of these same questions and decided that I wasn't going to live a life without the answers. And people around me saw me diligently researching and trying to live the information, and I kind of got blessed with a life purpose of life coaching. So my foundation at the AJ Zone, and you'll find it on my website, theajzone.com, with my members, is exactly what we're doing. Let's make sure we define these words so we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. One of the things I want to add to what Carolyn said was, I agree and disagree, to be honest. I agree with what she's saying completely about what the mom's responsible for. But I grew up with 4 older brothers. So that's where my foundation of even understanding boys and men starts before I even became a young woman in even adolescence. My brothers, good, bad, or indifferent, just a boy, a male, also watches the male figure ahead of him and how that male figure handles other women. So I believe that a lot of men, including my brothers, didn't necessarily just learn their ways, their masculine, bad boy, good boy, whatever ways from the relationship with my mom, but by watching and learning from my father. Culturally, we have to admit, there's a lot of men that were not raised and have not been, if they know their fathers at all.
Exactly.
So you have that whole issue as well. So what I want to say about it, just a general definition of bad boy, because where I come from is it's going to be different for everyone. A bad boy is really defined by what a woman allows in her life. If you don't allow certain behaviors from a man, you may not ever meet any of the 12 bad boys that Carolyn defines in her book. So I think we have to be very, very careful with defining somebody else outside of ourselves, how we define ourselves. Who we are attracted to in a man is a direct reflection of how we feel about ourselves, in my opinion.
Well, I think we all go through phases like that, because I know even I did it myself. My father said, I don't want you dating anybody who, has used drugs, who's like a drunk, who's been in prison, jail or prison, who doesn't have a college degree. He had this whole long list. Girl, why did I go out and find? So it's like, you know what I mean? He was everything. Everything my parents said, don't mess with, this guy was that. But I was like 18, 19 years old. And, but I quickly got over that because it was just too much. It was just too much of a strain to be in the relationship and have to hide it from my family. And, the changes that this guy put me through, and I just couldn't deal with it. So I got my bad boy thing out of my system early, and I was done.
But even then, I have a question for you. Even then at 18, it's one thing for your parents to tell you, don't do this, don't do that. But in terms of the male images that were presented to you, that built your image of what kind of guy you'd even be attracted to at 18, who was responsible for that image? Was it your father? Was it your uncle? Was it men you watched on TV? What created the image of what you were attracted to?
Probably a combination of all of those things. Because I think really seriously, AJ, the only reason I was attracted to this guy was because he was forbidden fruit.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
That's a great conversation.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons why some women are attracted to these guys, because it has to do with a rebelliousness of having to have been the good girl for too much of their lives, and this forbidden guy, with sulky guy in the corner means not just excitement, but it means rebelling against parents who told you what you should look out for.
Carole, I have a question. What made you write this book?
Well, actually, it was an interesting. I had a co-writer who asked me who had interviewed me for some article she was writing for Cosmo, I think, but not about bad boys. And she said, someday we're going to have to write a book together. She liked my answers about whatever the topic was. And a few years later, she called me up and she said, how would you like to write a book with me? I have an idea to write a book about bad boys. And at first I thought, I don't know, because I was very into, at the time, being an activist against violence in the media, which I still am. And I had always thought that was going to be my first book. And then, so I said, let me think about it. And then I thought about it, and I thought, if there's anybody to write a book about bad boys, it would be me.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. This is the answer I'm looking for. Did you come, in this book you wrote, did you come from a certain amount of experience with the bad boys, or lack of experience with the bad boys?
Well, I came from a number of different perspectives. Certainly experience with all 12 types would be there. I had to do research. But also as a psychiatrist for countless years, I've heard women telling me their stories about bad boys forever, and I also saw and treated bad boys, and saw the other side of the coin, how it may look like fun on the outside, and to some degree they're having fun, but really underneath, these are a lot of lonely, angry, unhappy, confused men.
Well, I asked that, Candace. Is this Deborah or Candace?
No, this is Deborah.
Okay, Deborah, I'm sorry. Okay, the reason I asked that, just so that you know, is because not only did I want all of us to understand why we're even talking about this, because I don't want people thinking I'm here because I'm an actress. That has nothing to do with it. I'm here, or a life coach. I'm here because, as I said in the beginning, not only have I had the personal experiences with what I define as bad boys for my lifetime, but I'm still trying to get it right. And I'm single still, whether people think I'm successful, not, Hollywood, not, whatever the makeup is you may label me, I'm still trying to get it right, like so many of us are, male and female. So, I mean, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and say, okay, it's great that Carole wrote a book, but really what's more important to me for this conversation than the fact that she's an author is she's lived this crap.
Heck yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, let's take this call. We got a call coming in from area code 803. Your mic is open. What's your question or comment?
It's sincere. You know, I was listening to what y'all was saying, and I just want to interject something from a male point of view who actually has been kind of a product of this because, you know, growing up, you know, I was adopted, and I didn't know who my real father was. So my mom, you know, the guy that she actually ended up marrying, you know, beat her so bad to the point where she ended up going crazy and had to go into a home. And then my dad that, you know, adopted, who was really my uncle, he had 18 kids.
Ooh.
So, you know, so he had kids all throughout the Bronx. You know what I mean? He had kids going from the east to the west side of the Bronx. So now as a result, you know, I kind of find myself, you know, shying away from him because I picked up some of his habits. And so what I would tell women is that, you know, if a dude is not willing to be emotionally available to you, if he, you know, if he puts you into that jump off category where, you know, he only sees you at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's a bad sign because I've done it. And it's not that I really want to do it, it's just that I don't know anything else.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
that's what we're talking about.
And so, you know, I would just caution women. It's like, you know, and it's, you know, I've been able to, you know, even though I came from a very, you know, very poor neighborhood and all that stuff, I've been able to do okay and buy a home and, you know, be in corporate America and all that stuff. But, you know, at the end of the day, I've had a lot of good. I've dated an attorney. I dated you know, someone who's with human resources. I've dated a lot of successful women, but I actually shy away from them because I think I'm doing them a favor. Because I feel like their life is going to end up miserable because I'm going to do something to fuck them up. So.
I've heard guys say that too, because they don't want to feel guilty for ruining your happiness because they don't think that they are whole and healthy enough to really give the woman the relationships that they feel that she deserves.
See,
so, you know.
Here's the other thing too. I think we got to add to this because, you know, bad boy is a name that we've come up with to categorize certain characteristics of different men. That's going into the psychology of it. But really, if we look at this gentleman who's called in, instead of saying he's a bad boy, kind of like what I said in the beginning, he's really a product and a victim of an environment that didn't necessarily give him better qualities as a man to provide for a woman. Now, my question is, there's women who can and cannot choose him. So listening to him say, well, you know, I shy away because I know that I don't want to harm her or bring no good upon her. Well, where's the woman who's saying, you know what? I'm not saying he's bad. He's just not good for me.
Right.
You know what it is, though. You know, being that you know what I do professionally, I have to communicate for a living. Yeah, I don't have a problem being able to communicate with a woman, so women don't get taken in by the fact that, you know, I'm able to express myself and then actually genuinely listen to what their thoughts and concerns are. However, with that being the case, it's also a means of manipulation. Yeah,
manipulation.
Because they listen because of the fact that I come across as being genuine and I actually listen to them. You know, at the end of the day, after, you know, I get to the point of, you know what, I'm getting bored with this chick, I'm on to the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So there is kind of a bad boy in you. But, you know, I think part of it comes from you sort of sabotage these things because at the bottom of it, you're really afraid that if you do get into a relationship where you're in love, that this woman is going to abandon you like your biological mother did.
Well, she didn't biologically. She didn't abandon me. She did. It took me a little bit of growing up to figure out she did it out of love because she couldn't provide for me. And she could have aborted me.
And that happens in a lot of. I mean, I'm assuming just because I'm hearing your voice, but I don't want to assume. Let me ask: are you African American?
I'm from the South Bronx, so you know.
There you go.
Not too many people other than black and Puerto Rican in the South Bronx. You know what I mean?
Right. So I mean, you know, we have a lot of. I mean, that's another aspect of this conversation. Before we leave the idea of how do we define bad boy, I think the one thing Deborah and Carole we have to do is realize a lot of what gives us that parts of the definition are also cultural. They're gender bent, they're age related. There's a lot that calculates that. Like Deborah, you said, you know, there was a certain type of bad boy at 18. Well, I can give you a list of the kind I've dealt with at 35.
Well, I just went down my dad's list. Check. Everything he said this guy was. Every single one. But at least I got it out of my system in one fell swoop.
Yes, it's true. A lot of times women just continue to go after bad boys time and time again, and until either they're hurt enough, or until they finally, either it's the one guy who hurts them enough, or it's the repetition of a number of guys where finally she sort of throws up her hands and realizes that maybe it's time to nurture herself. But it does come from low self-esteem. It comes from feeling as though you're not good enough to get a good guy, to get a guy who's going to treat you like a princess.
And even defining, I mean, ooh, Carole, you opened up a nice can of worms, because no, seriously, I mean, one of the directions that I go in my coaching as well as with my website community is making sure that there's spiritual work, there's mental work, there's self-motivation. I mean, that's, a lot of people come to me for weight loss, but what I try to show them is if there's a need for weight loss, it's because there's a lot of other quote-unquote fat going on in your life, like stuff that's making you have low self-esteem, and let's dig into that, and that way we can figure out what's making you reach for the cupcakes after that. But Carole, you hit the nail on the head to me in terms of, what's attracting us women to these men that are not necessarily good for us. I'm going to keep saying that, because I think more than, again, putting a label on a man, I want to focus on what's going on with us to make us go after a guy that just is not going to be good for us.
Well, what I wanted to do first, though, was have Carole identify some of the types of guys that aren't good, because I have to start at the basics. This is like preschool. There are a lot of women, if this is just like we talked about the guys, if this is the only example that you have seen, how do you know that it's bad?
Exactly.
So that's why I want her to, to kind of address that. She does in the book, but of course not everyone has seen it yet. It's up on the page, but if you could just maybe give a couple of sentences, the highlights of, say, maybe the top 5 or 6 that most women run into, that would be ideal.
Okay, well, I was mentioning before the fixer-upper lover, or the frazzled frog. I name all of these after, I relate them to fairy tales that we've grown up on. So that's a guy, as I was starting to say, who doesn't really have his act together, and he's looking for a woman to nurture him. And women who go after this type of man are women whose father either wasn't there for them. Either he died, or now with all the divorces, he wasn't really around very much once her parents got divorced, or he was a workaholic and he just wasn't home very much. And the reason why a woman would go after a guy like this, and again, this is unconscious. It's not that a woman is saying to herself, I think I'll go after a fixer-upper lover because. But it's because she feels that this is a man who's going to be very dependent upon her, and that he will be the least likely to leave her like her father did. So that's sort of on the, and that's not a guy, he's not a guy who you would look at first glance and think of as a bad boy, because he just seems like this innocent little nerd sometimes, or just someone who's kind of not all formed, like a tadpole. Then, of course, we have the compulsive flirt. There seems to be an epidemic of those going around these days, like Tiger Woods, for example. This is a guy who either just flirts and stops at the stage where he feels that he could get another woman into bed, or a guy who actually does take these women into bed, and he uses you as home base. You're his security blanket, and meanwhile he's out flirting and really bolstering his male ego. And then, let's see, another one that's kind of course, there's the commitment phobe. This is a guy who,
Lord.
Yes, this is sort of who we, a guy who we go out with, and we maybe sometimes for years, and he gets close to making a commitment, but he never quite seals the deal. And it's because he is afraid that if a woman gets too close, that she'll see his flaws. Now, what's interesting is that women who go out with commitment phobes, actually, even though they complain about the man not making a commitment, these are women who deep down don't want to make a commitment either.
I've always thought that, too.
They use him as an excuse. Another type is the let's see. Well, of course, we have to talk about the Prince of Darkness. That would be, the OJ type, the Scott Peterson type. It's a guy who is physically or sexually abusive, and he charms the woman at the beginning. I also call him the voracious vampire. He takes the woman on an incredible courtship, whirlwind courtship, wins her heart, sweeps her off her feet, and then once she gets under his spell, he isolates her from other people, and he's always paying attention to, for example, the odometer in her car, how many miles she's driven. He calls her all the time, where are you? He becomes incredibly possessive, which at the beginning is very attractive to the girl because she doesn't feel lovable, and here's this man who's going crazy over her. But then, of course, it ends in abuse, or it ends in death, can end in death. And, it's interesting. I talk about how the compulsive flirt, if he's actually taking women to bed, and the Prince of Darkness, and then also the lethal lover, that's the man who's in jail, who, committed all kinds of crimes. Those are the men who women need to get away from quickly. But with the others, I talk about how you can try to make the relationships work. I mean, with these relationships too, you can try to make them work, but you have to be separated from the man because he needs a lot of therapy.
Those are all excellent examples of very, very common relationship types. Okay. Now, are there any identifiers that a woman can know early on in the game? And AJ, you can chime in on this too. Like the things that she just mentioned. Say you're on a first or second date with a guy. What might be some red flags to let you know that this is one of these red flag guys?
One of the first things I think about, and this kind of goes into, I have steps that I give, excuse me, in talking about how to date smarter, not harder. And really what it comes down to, again, is how well do you know yourself, and therefore, what are you representing in what you want to date? So when you come to a date with almost like an interview mentality based on, you going after the story that you want to write, which is the relationship you want to have, you're going to come from a different perspective. One of the first things I think is, if you're looking for a man that's not going to be, let's go with one of Carole's descriptions of a bad boy is the consummate flirt. Well, there's easy things to look for. Is he very attentive to you, or is he attentive to anything in a short skirt that's in the room? Is his conversation focused on himself, or does he seem interested in what he's talking about and asking you? Does he seem generally interested in you and you as a person? Not your dress, not your legs, not your hair, but you as a person, who you are, what you do for a living, what you want out of life. These are the kind of conversations that someone who's interested in you, wants to have. The other thing I think we don't do as women, and I mean, that's like we get into it deeper, but we're afraid to step up in our conversations with men to represent who we are and what we want. I'm not saying you got to go to a first date and say, I want to be married in 2 years. How about you? But at the same time, you can say to a man, so what is it that you want in life? Where are you in life now? What is it that you want more? What's your better look like? And he'll tell you directly in his conversation, in his answer, he'll let you know if there's a wife in there. He'll let you know if it's a woman in there. Or you may not hear any of that language that says relationship guy. So you have to listen to what they say as well as listen to what they don't say.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
What about you, Carol? What do you say?
Well, I would just caution that bad boys know what to say, know the answer, that they're very tuned in and able to manipulate women, and they know the answer that a woman wants to hear. And so they may, from what they know of you so far, may figure, I think she wants a man who would be like this, and then they tell you that that's where they want to see their life in the next 5 years. So there is that caution. You do have to kind of look below the surface of whether they're telling you what you want to hear or whether they really have taken steps in their life to go after these things that they say they want.
And to me, all you're going to really get to, and Carole, I want to ask you this as I'm making a statement, and Deborah, you too. It's really a statement and a question. You know, one of the other things I want to make sure we're educating women on that I've had to learn from what I've had to learn the hard way is everything you're saying, Carole, about, yeah, they may lead you to believe, they may say what they know you want to hear, but the only thing that's going to really tell the truth about them is time. You're not going to know everything in one date. You may not know everything in 2 dates. But, you know, all of a sudden, because we're so hungry as women to be in a relationship, if he's driving a nice car, dressed nice, takes you to a nice restaurant, he's halfway in before he even, you know, pulls the chair out at the dinner table. As opposed to, give it some time. You know, my father, rest his soul, used to tell me, you don't even necessarily need to think about getting intimate with a man for at least 6 months. Let me tell you why he told me. Not because of him, because there's 6 months worth of woman that the man needs to get to know before he needs to decide, am I right for him? So my dad would say, forget him. Make sure you're educating him to the 6 different women that live in you. If they can last while they get to know these different personalities and, you know, idiosyncrasies and attitudes and you know, joys and pains, and if they're going to stick around to get to know you, that's different. But we as women don't give it time.
Yes, that's true. A lot of times women are just trying to get the man involved by having sex with them on the first date, which doesn't usually, you know, it may hook a man for a period of time, but it's not going to keep him forever if you know, if he's being manipulated into it. Actually, I'm writing a book now, Bad Girls. So I've been interviewing scores of men. It's sort of the counterpart to my Bad Boys, and so I've been learning some of the tricks that women use, but I mean, not that I didn't know.
Let me tell you one of mine.
Yes.
In reference to AJ's questioning, I don't like to tell a guy anything. I want to hear what he's got to say. So I'm going to ask him questions, and just to test him, I do this all the time. They say, oh, yeah, you know, because they're looking at you right there, trying to say, okay, she looks, like you said, Dr. Carole, she looks like the type that wants to get married and, you know, have a bunch of kids and this whole thing. So they start coming out with that line. I'll look them dead in the eye and say, what? You want to get married? Ugh.
Right. And see where they're coming from. Good tactic.
And you should see people's face twist up. They start backpedaling. Well, I mean, you know, like someday. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be like right now. You know, I was thinking, you know, that would be nice. Oh, yes, honey. All kinds of actions start coming into effect. I do that all the time. Whatever they say, they want the opposite, and it's just a test.
That's funny.
Well, I mean, you guys moving on to the next question. Why is it that when you start dating and you find yourself attracted to these types of guys, and the woman knows that it's not gonna work, why do so many women stay in the situation? They're like trying to love him into being. They feel like some of them, like, if I just love him enough, he'll change. He'll become the man I want him to be. He'll be different. He'll be better. I just need to love him more. And then other people feed into that too. Like if a guy cheats on her, well, you know, you're not holding it down. There must be something you're not doing. You're not keeping your man happy. You're a black woman. Black women don't know how to keep a man. All this kind of stuff. Somehow she is blamed for his behavior, even though I know she, you know, shouldn't really be dealing with him. But I want to find out from you, though, you know, what is the motivation for women with this mentality of staying in it and putting more time, more energy, and more love into a black hole?
Well, unconsciously, what it has to do with is because these women are trying to work things out from their relationship with their father, whether it's finding a man who's exactly like their father or exactly opposite their father or something in between but motivated by how their father was, they are living what Freud called the repetition compulsion. In other words, they are trying to have their story from childhood that ended unhappily, ended with them feeling unlovable, they're trying to make it come out with a happier ending by living it through this relationship with a man and trying to make it work this time. So like, if they can make this relationship work, they feel as though it will undo the pain that they had related to their relationship with their father.
Gotcha.
I want to add to that, because honestly, my situation is very, very different from that philosophy. I had an incredible relationship with my father, and it kind of sits closer to, trying to find somebody like my dad, although it's not so much like my dad, but it's just the qualities of what I believe an upstanding man is about. And my dad was a very big, and first clearly, as my father, a big example of what that kind of man is. Now, the other side for me is being the baby of a large family. My father was always older for me. So there's a little bit of a generational gap that always existed between me and my father. So that's why I say it wasn't quite that I was looking for someone like my father, but the gentleman qualities, the chivalry that he expressed with my mother and just with my aunts and women, there's just things that I felt like a princess should receive. And in me defining what princess meant for myself, I saw my father being a type of man that treated a woman as that princess. I'm kind of going back to, you got to define princess to know how to find a man to treat you like one.
Well, but now, did your father die when you were growing up?
No, my father's deceased now, but my father didn't pass until about 3 years ago. So my father was always around. So
well,
what I was
there? I'm just trying to figure out which. One of the types of men, bad boys that I talk about, is the brooding beast or the wounded poet. And that is from the story of Beauty and the Beast. Now, in that story, as I'm sure you both remember, Beauty loved her father. He was a wonderful man. But when the story begins, he has lost his wife, Beauty's mother, and he lost his fortune. And so Beauty, as a little girl, felt bad for her father and wanted to rescue her father and wanted to make his life better. And of course, being a little girl, she couldn't do any of that. And then when she met the Beast, who repulsed her, the only time when she decided that she would go back to the Beast and then fell in love with him was when he was laying wounded in a cage. He needed rescuing. And when she realized that he needed rescuing and she went back to him, that's when she all of a sudden felt this love and kissed him, and he turned into a handsome prince. And so sometimes when women say that, and so the kinds of men that these are, that women, the Beauty and the Beast type of stories these women go after, are men who need to be rescued. They may be moody, and underneath the moodiness, they're an artistic, sensitive soul. They're wounded in some way, emotionally wounded. And so women are drawn to fixing him, to rescuing him, because of their having not been able to rescue from whatever was making their father sad when they were little girls.
Well, okay. I mean, but basically, where I was going with me as my own example is kind of going back to your question, Deborah, which was, why do we as women constantly repeat that behavior? Why do we go for that kind of guy? And what I was going to say is, again, my situation with my father was completely different than what Carole was describing. But what I do feel like is one of my issues that I find a lot of women, and I did some interviewing from Hollywood celebrity women to single moms to career women, a lot of different kind of women. Carole, you may amen this or not, but we also don't find the right support group in our female surroundings. There's more women that have problems with men that are not talking to successfully married women or successfully married men. It's like, why are you going to your girlfriend who has never had a great relationship for her advice? It doesn't make sense to me. But we do it. We do it. And so to me, it's like, okay, when you said, Deborah, what makes a woman do that? Okay, well, when you have that date and the man is saying everything that he's supposed to say, there's got to be a support group in your repertoire of a lot of different men, a lot of different women that you can say, I'm really kind of feeling this guy. This is what happened at our first date. What do you guys think? I'm not going to call any names, but I got 2 celebrity clients right now that will swear they're in the greatest relationships ever. But this is the other answer from me of what happened. They make a list of what they feel like is important for them to receive. And unfortunately, a lot of times, the non-bad boy behavior is not a priority on that list. We're very materialistic. We're very much, can you support my lifestyle financially? And as long as that's happening, can you take me and my girlfriends out? Can you help me travel? Can you show me things I can't do on my own? A lot of times lately, I think those things take priority over the basics in a man.
They're just looking for a different kind of relationship, though. Not everyone wants that white picket fence and 2.5 children.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, though. But again, if you don't want that, you're going to find yourself calling some guy a bad boy. When really it's, okay, well, let's check what you're really looking for. Because you may be dating the kind of guy you're attracted to, and it may not ever be a good guy in what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take this call from Liberal 14. Liberal, your mic's open. Hello.
I talked too long. They hung up.
I'm sorry. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry. One reason why a lot of guys become bad boys because a lot of guys, when they're a nice person and everything, they get treated like they're nothing and everything, and then they get fed up of getting hurt and things like that, and they switch it up and say, you know what, let me become a bad boy, and suddenly they get suddenly a lot of women are calling them, they get all the attraction, they get a lot of fun and everything. That's why a lot of guys switch it up, because a lot of people don't respect when a guy is not, when a guy is proper, when a guy is treating the person properly.
Isn't that interesting?
That's one reason, I think.
Yes.
I see a lot of my friends were really nice guys. I know one friend was a sweetheart with women, and he got hurt so much, and he said, you know what, no more. And once he changed, he became the baddest boy in the world in Montreal. And he switched. He went from total nice, everything that you want, honest, character, everything, but he got so much hurt, he said, fuck it, I'm not doing what I want. I was played, I called them up and everything, they treat me like we just wanted you to be our friends, and I'm always in the friend zone. I don't that. So they switch it up.
That's
really what do you say about that?
Yes, it's true, absolutely, and it's sad. What it has to do with is that women, one of the reasons, is sort of a general reason why, another reason why women go for bad boys is because they are afraid of a really close relationship. They're afraid of getting hurt. And so when a guy, we say we want guys with roses and poems and all that kind of stuff, but when a guy is too available and gives us all that, then all of a sudden we feel stifled or we're like, it's too close. All of a sudden it's be careful what you wish for. And these are women who again, it goes back to the low self-esteem. It's because they're afraid that if they do let a man in and they do really fall in love and they do with someone who is so present and so nice, that then they will be really devastated when this man leaves them. But it's unfortunately it's all twisted around, because this isn't necessarily a man who's going to leave them, and yet it's because the women are too scared because of their own experiences, because of them feeling that they're not lovable, that they don't trust this. They think that this is if they get involved, they're just going to be really brokenhearted.
Well, what's up with the good guys thing, though? Why is it that it just seems like when women get older, they have more appreciation for that kind of stability and the calm and things that men offer?
I was just getting ready to say that this is where the whole, I'm not big on age, but this is where I believe age, really meaning experience with us as women, comes in. Because when you're approaching the 20s and 30s, you're experimenting, you may not know and this again, I speak for myself and other girlfriends I've spoken with, you may not know what you really, really want. You may not know yourself well enough to know what's going to work for you. So you experiment based on a lot of things that just come up, like how a guy looks, or what a guy has, or where a guy lives, or who the guy, what the guy can have access to on your behalf. When you start to get into the 30s and go into the 40s, you know yourself a little bit better. You know what's going to make you feel better in terms of your attention, the attention given to you in a relationship. So you all of a sudden kind of look for something different. I think the older we get, the more we realize that we've had a lot of experiences that have taught us what we want, what's going to work for us. And there's no more playing around.
I agree.
So I really think, the whole bad boy thing, I go back to, I think it also has a thing to do with age. There's the kind of guy that I would go for when I was 18, like you, Deborah, that couldn't even get my attention now that I'm 35.
Yeah, just look at him like, what? Ew,
yeah, it just
get away
his
from me.
conversation. I mean, let's face it. And again, culturally, there's guys under 30, some guys over 30. We'll talk about that in another interview. But there's guys under 30 with their pants hanging down off their butt, the baseball hat turned. Whereas for me, I'm looking at a businessman now. I like a man in some slacks and a shirt, maybe a suit. If I go to a sports bar, I'm not looking at the guy in jeans and the Laker hat. I'm looking at the guy who's in the sports bar watching the Laker game in a suit. I wasn't doing that 20 years ago.
Oh.
So, I mean,
let's take, we have another call in. Caller, your mic is open. 111 is what is showing up on the phone.
Yeah, I can understand why women love bad boys. The rebel in them, the kind of person who's against the establishment. What I don't like are women who go for the thugs. The person, again, who's a rebel, I can understand that. Again, when you're over 30, 35, your values may change.
Right.
Like when I was younger, I liked putting up notches on my headboard. But now that I'm over 40, you can't bore me. If you're good looking and you're stupid, you got to go. So it has to be more than just looks for a man, at least over 40. And for the woman, I was liking, I don't know who it was, until she said when she goes to a sports bar, she has to look for the guy with a suit. Why is a guy in a suit in a sports bar?
Okay, this is AJ. This is AJ, and let me correct you, because, again, communication is key, and words are very, very important. I didn't say I had to go for them. I said different than what I used to look at when I was younger. I'm attracted to a businessman. So I use that kind of clothing as an example. Now, there may be a businessman in the sports bar in jeans and a hat. I'm just not going to look at him initially thinking he's a businessman. Now, he may come up to me with great conversation, and I'll say, wow, he's fun, likes sports. He could be somebody else. I'm not saying I won't give him the chance, but my point is, the older I've gotten, I look for different things. That was just an example of what I meant.
All right.
Yeah, her initial attraction, her eye is not going to be drawn to the guy with the sagging pants and the baseball cap turned to the side.
I heard that, but why would a guy in a suit, unless he's right off of work in a sports bar, he'd be thrown right out of the sports bar?
Well, you know what? And I'll tell you why I use that as an example, to be honest, because the guy I dated, that's an exact example. I was in a sports bar. This was during the Laker playoffs last season, the one that they just won. And first of all, I noticed him because I thought the same thing as you. Why is this guy in the sports bar doing Laker playoffs in a suit?
Yeah.
I brought him a drink because I wanted to find out, who are you and what are you doing, and why did you not get a chance to change your suit? So I wanted to find out who this guy was. It started from there. We ended up dating about 6 months because he turned out to be a businessman who really was not off work but just kind of took a break from work. But point is, it got my attention. Yeah. And my point, like I said before, is 15 years ago, that would have never got my attention. I was looking for something different.
Okay, here's another question for both of you. I'm glad that, judging by the pictures, both black and white there on the panel. What percentage of women do you believe culturally across the racial lines, do you think that women really go for not just the rebels, but I mean really bad guys that don't like women, misogynists, guys that will beat them? What percentage do you think it actually exists in America?
I honestly am proud to say I have no idea.
Well, it's sort of been a growing percentage because partly because of the media making these guys seem so sexy. It has to do with the woman wanting that man's power, even though you're describing him as a thug. I mean, these are like what I would have described in my book as the lethal lovers, the prison guys.
You have a book?
Excuse me?
You have a book?
Yes.
Glad
you asked. Yes, the website is drcarole.com, which is drcarole.com.
Okay.
I talk about lethal lovers. And these are the guys, the reason why women are attracted to them, besides, their own upbringing, which was very devastating, is because it's like a lion circling the town with a thorn in his paw. And if this woman can take the thorn out of this lion's paw, everybody else in the village is shuddering and scared of this lion, just like people are scared of the thugs, the really bad thugs. And this woman, if this lion or this thug or this lethal lover lets the woman take the thorn out of his paw, then she all of a sudden becomes the most powerful person in the village because she was the one who was able to tame the thug. Now, she may just be able to tame him while he's behind bars, and when he gets out, he could start roaring again. But that's why women, that's the romantic attraction that these guys have for women.
Who was describing the fear of intimacy? I forget if it was you or the other lady on the panel.
Yes, I was, Dr.
You were.
Carole.
All right. Do you think that the fear of intimacy is more powerful as a non-motivator, as someone who is repulsed by that, someone who wants to go against intimacy, as opposed to the woman who doesn't mind getting beat? In other words, is it more painful to have love, lose it, than it is to get physically beat and not get love?
Well, the women who get physically beaten are the ones who were most desperate, were most easily taken in by these men who put her on this whirlwind courtship and seem incredibly possessive because this is the first time that they've had a man they think at the beginning, so madly in love with them. And this is really feeding into what they've been desperate for all their life. And of course, the physical, they tolerate it for a while. They keep thinking that, the man begs forgiveness and says, I'll never do this again, and she wants to believe him. And so that's why she stays in it until sometimes, she winds up dead.
Let me add something to that, and I want to chime in because I was involved in a domestic violent relationship. But it also goes in line with what you're saying, Carole, about the power thing. Some women, I believe, end up dating what they consider to be a bad boy because they really don't believe that they're going to meet the man on their level of whatever life they're living, whether it's financial, whether it's career-based, wherever their power lies, the woman's power. Sometimes it's hard for them to find a man to match their power or beyond.
Right.
So we have a tendency to date, and I'll say we date down, only because a bad boy is not a good thing for us. So I'll say date down because it's not a good thing. So powerful women have a tendency to date down. So what happens in the domestic situation is not even so much that sometimes the woman wants to stay because she's looking for it, but because she's already dropped her standards, then she's already thinking there's a lot that she's supposed to tolerate, she's supposed to settle for, and even though that domestic violent behavior that she may know is not what's supposed to be given to her, but
Right.
she's accepting it because it's part of this territory that she's really not familiar with because she's already dropped her standards to even date anyway.
Yeah, but here's my question, though. My question is the fear of intimacy, of getting involved with a nice guy, so powerfully, not repulsive, but they're afraid of it so much that it's...
I see what you're saying.
Okay,
that they
it
even...
is, that the bad boy, even though the bad boy beats them physically, it is less painful to be beaten physically than it is to be rejected by a nice guy.
Yes, to some degree. I mean, it's because the woman isn't thinking about these things rationally, like, which one should I pick, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say that's a really general statement.
it's that she's just drawn to these things, to these men, unconsciously. And so, I mean, most women don't even realize that they're afraid of intimacy because of disappointments that they had in their relationship with their father, for example. Well, I mean, not just for example. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And so they don't connect it, and they don't realize that this is why they don't want to get involved with this good boy who they think will discover that if they get close enough, will discover that they're really not, that they, the girl, is not really as wonderful as the guy thinks she is. That, he may seem like this great guy, but wait till he gets to know her. She's afraid that when he really gets to know her and sees that she's really not lovable, that then he's going to want to go away, that he'll have higher standards.
Interesting. Well, we're winding down to the last 5 minutes of the show, so I'd like each of you to give your closing comments on how a woman can ease away from bad boys and, maybe balance her choices and get, a good guy with a little bad boy in him, I think would be a good mix. Someone just to keep it exciting. Not exciting. I mean, to keep it exciting but not break her heart. You have any suggestions for that?
I definitely do, and if you don't mind, it's one of the things I even wrote you about. I still go back to a woman really has to focus on knowing herself. And once again, the men that we define as right for us is exactly that. It's as unique as you are. So when you really, really spend time working on yourself, getting to know yourself, and knowing what works for you and what makes you happy, it's going to help to design everything in your life, but especially what kind of man is going to work for you. When you decide to go outside of that happy list, I'll say, it could be to any degree, a large degree or a not so large degree. But when you find yourself going outside of that happy list, that's where it becomes bad. I can keep it that simple. It doesn't have to be huge, but you just have to pay attention and not settle, not tolerate what you know is not going to be princess behavior for yourself.
Okay.
Well,
sounds good.
I guess I certainly agree with that. I think the bottom line is that there really couldn't be bad boys, or I mean they could exist, but they wouldn't be able to be bad if we women didn't let them.
Exactly.
If we didn't tolerate their behavior, whether it's the voracious vampire abusive guy or the guy who's the fixer-upper lover, because he breaks your heart in a different way. What happens is when women nurture these guys who are dependent upon her, who she thinks will never leave her, once she nurtures him and he gets his act together, then he hops away and he finds some woman who, he thinks he couldn't have gotten before, but now that he's all fixed up, he can. So the bottom line is that women need to fix themselves first. They need to whatever is, whatever you went through, whatever kind of family relationship, whatever kind of father you had, whatever, you need to look at that and be honest, maybe go into therapy, or at least, look at yourself hard in the mirror and decide what kinds of things there are that you want to fix. I don't mean just like plastic surgery, but I mean the inside, becoming more spiritual or becoming more educated or becoming more ambitious or becoming more nurturing, whatever it is that you would like to be. You have to make yourself into that person and rescue yourself in a sense before you go out there and start looking for bad boys to rescue.
Gotcha. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for coming through. This was a great talk. And Carole, when you finish with your book on bad girls, get in touch with me.
Absolutely.
I'd like to have you back on the show. And you too, AJ, just let me know. Okay, ladies? Thank you very much.
Bye. It was last.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that very interesting discussion. I think there's probably a lot more that we could add to this, and I may do that in another video sometime down the road. But in general, I think we hit the most important aspects of the choices that women make and why women, even the nicer girls that people say, well, she's all educated, and she's raised in church, and she's like a goody two shoes. To me, those are the types that are even more likely to be attracted to the bad boy because they're the complete opposite of everything that those young ladies have been told to look for. And when you live a life where you're just doing everything your parents said and you're living like a model citizen, things do tend to get a little boring. So the bad boys and the player types bring a level of excitement of the unknown that I think is very attractive to some women. The problem is when those women don't understand, okay, this is just a plaything. This is just a good time. You don't fall in love and you don't have his kid. So see, that's where they mess up and then they get stuck in a situation that they can't really get out of. But hopefully that won't be you, and you can take the information presented in this video and learn from it and move on to a healthy relationship with somebody that's going to love you back as much as you love them. This is Deb Cooper from survivingdating.com signing out.